Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Ask Us Anything at CppCon. Today you'll be asking questions in library evolution roles, whatever you want. You can ask us what we're thinking. You can ask us what we were thinking. You can ask us what were we thinking, but I may not pick that question if it's in caps. So before I continue with introductions, a disclaimer. So I am not John Kalb. No one on this panel is John Kalb. Should this panel suddenly contain one or more John Kalbs, you should notify a substitute John Kalb, aka Bryce, to correct the issue. With that out of the way, we will do the introductions. So I am Ben Craig, Vice Chair of Library Evolution and Embedded Domain Lead of SG14, the Low Latency Study Group. I work at NI, and people may know me for my work on Freestanding C++. Corentin, you're up.
Hello, my name is Corentin Jabot. I am a freelance developer currently working in an audio company. I am a committee member since 2008. I write paper. I am a member of Library Evolution, the SG16 Unicode study group, and currently managing, along with Inbal Levy, the mailing list discussion on the Library Evolution reflector.
Tom.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Honermann. I am the chair of the SG16 Text and Unicode Processing Group, along with Corentin there. I have been working with the committee since 2015. Lenexa was my first WG21 meeting. I currently work for Synopsys on the Covariety Static Analyzer, where I focus on our C and C++ front ends.
And Billy.
Hello, I'm Billy Baker. I've been working with WG21 since 2013. After the Prague meeting, I accepted the position of SG18 Library Evolution Working Group Incubator Chair. You'll see my co-chair this afternoon, Nevin Lieber. And I guess back to you, Ben.
Okay, so we're going to start with a question, a warm-up question from me to the other people here. After that, I will be taking the highest voted questions out of the Q&A. So I'm going to give a little bit of chance for that to build up and for people to vote on what they are interested in. So the first question is going to be, what is, out of the library, what is your favorite C++ 20 feature? So Corentin.
Hunches. I will go with that. It's a big feature, so there's a lot in there, but I think it's really transformative in how we can write C++ code and algorithm.
Tom, what about you?
Similarly, I'm going to go with concepts. The library concepts that have landed there, I think, are going to be just incredibly useful for writing generic code, and they make it really fun as well. Just how the code comes together now. I started experimenting with using concepts back when Andrew Sutton was first putting together his origin library, and yeah, it really helped unlock my brain in terms of how I thought about the code I was writing. So I'm really interested to see how people start using all those fundamental concepts in their own code.
And Billy.
Well, let's see here. There's lots of great features, but I'm going to pick a particularly small one. We added the numbers header with mathematical constants. And for someone who has seen code bases with 13 different versions of pi, being able to point to one header and say, there's pi for you, to me is a great win.
And I think I'm going to go with the format library. I've always had been guilty of using printf in a C++, printf and family in a C++ 17 code base, and now I don't have to be guilty anymore, and I can use format instead of dealing with IO streams. Okay, well, I was going to try to get something that was for somebody else first, but the highest voted question so far is, can you talk about the direction of freestanding, features that will be included, excluded, etc.? So it's still in progress. Things may make it into C++ 23. The thing that is most likely to make it into C++23 isn't even a library feature, it's a language feature, and it's the opposite of a feature. It's not requiring operator new to be there by default. But if you want to see a general direction of what kinds of library facilities will be there, assuming my vision for freestanding goes through, you can look at P0829, that paper, and it has the high level of what all things and what features are going to be there. Longer term, there may be some other language features that disappear, but that's a not very deep answer on what's going into freestanding. Commentary from other people on what they think on directions of freestanding. Okay.
I hope we make progress on that, because I think it's really important C++ to have better embedded platform support, but no one in this chat will understand Ben.
Okay, so let's see. Oh, this one should be a good one for discussion. So, should we have the networking in C++ standard without encryption? So the networking TS does not contain TLS support. So I think I'm going to start with Tom for now, because Billy's icon's got a swirl disconnect there.
It was nice talking with you, Billy.
What do you think about the networking TS, especially if it does not have encryption? Do you think it belongs there or not?
Yeah, we had a great discussion on this at maybe it was Prague. I can't remember what. No, Belfast. In Belfast, there was a good discussion about this, and I think I'm kind of undecided. I mean, I think the security aspects and encryption are incredibly important to have in there. That's what's needed most of the time. But on the other hand, there are use cases for just the most simple basic stuff, and if that can make progress and we add the encryption later, maybe that's okay. But I think networking is certainly not done until strong encryption support is present.
Corentin, do you have any opinions on this?
I do. So I agree with Tom that encryption is really important, and I will go so far as to say that networking without encryption has a very dwelling number of use cases, and people tend to assume that the committee leads the way and know what we are doing. And so if we put networking in the standard without encryption, we are sending a strong signal that you don't actually need encryption, or maybe it's okay to not use encryption. And there is very few use cases where you can go without encryption. Basically, it's limited to private network in some cases. So I really think any networking should have encryption. Networking, if you look at what it is, it's actually mostly an asynchronous model, and we are also working on another asynchronous model, which is sender receiver, which is really exciting as Corentin support. And I don't think we should have multiple asynchronous model in the standard. And so we should first focus on getting executor right, and this is a priority for C++23. And once we get that done, we can think about whether we want networking or whether we want a more general async IO facility and so forth. In the meantime, you can use Azure, which is a superset of the networking TS. It's open source library, it's maintained, and it supports encryption and a lot of more features. So use Azure.
I'll chime in on this as well, is that there's substantial vendor concerns when dealing with encryption and the networking TS. So Apple and Microsoft in particular have each of them have their C++ implementation, and they tend to have corporate guidelines for these are the kinds of things that we can ship. And I believe both of them say that, okay, you have to, you can't ship unencrypted libraries that do unencrypted transport, and so they would have to the C++ tool chains would have to get corporate exemptions for that, which sends off a weird message, at least internally to their companies, that yes, C++ is so special that we can, ship something that doesn't have encryption. Now, there is definitely the argument of, we need to make things that we can build upon. The encryption stuff should be built on top of the unencrypted things, and I can definitely see that. But I think there are some of these non-technical concerns that are going to make it challenging to ship without encryption. So we've got a follow-on question, and that is, if we have networking encryption, is it possible to have a standard encryption library? Let's start with Corentin this time.
So the issue with encryption library and in general more complex libraries that are still active area of research and development is that at this point the standard is pretty committed to strong ABI guarantee, and that means we cannot remove things that get deprecated for security reasons, and that make having cryptography in the standard library very, very challenging, because what is considered good cryptographic algorithm change basically every year. And then there is also the question of whether implementer have the bandwidth to deal with cryptography and the competence to deal with cryptography. And very few people have the expertise to do that, and it's not something we can afford to get wrong, and that tend to prove that it's not something that we can easily do in the standard library.
Okay, Billy, now that you're back, I'm going to hit you with a question. So if we have networking encryption in the networking TS, we don't right now, but if we have it, is it possible to have a standard encryption library?
So that's interesting, because we've talked about cryptography and other things in the standard library for a number of years. I think one of the first ones that I remember was in Champaign-Urbana. I think it would be hard, certainly working in an industry where we have to be very cognizant of export control. It would probably be at some level a good idea that we could point at our vendor supplied libraries, but at the same time, as the committee trying to figure out what that means, I think would be very difficult.
Did you want to chime in on this, Tom?
A little. I think having support for the various algorithms in the library is reasonable. How things work with PKI. I don't have a lot of particular thoughts about how we address things like that. But in general, I think having the algorithms there is okay. There's always potential for bugs, but I think that potential is always going to exist no matter which vendor you get something from.
So I guess I'll bring up one of the other, challenges like I did before, and that so OpenSSL is a thing, and it's got its cryptography libraries in there. And one of the big selling points of the OpenSSL cryptography library is that it's got some important industry certification. I don't remember the specific number, the specific group, and that's an expensive and difficult certification to get. And so we'd be competing against that, and it maybe the standard libraries and the standard itself could get that chunk of the library to get that kind of certification, but it would be a challenge.
And I'm not sure that it would be necessary, though, right? OpenSSL won't go away, right. So users can still opt into something that has that certification, and competition is good.
Yep. Okay, so now we've got something for the Unicode people in the group. Is
Boy.
ABI break, does the ABI break if you add Unicode support to strings and regex? Given the ABI stability decision in Prague, will it happen at all? Let's start with Tom.
Okay, well, I'm going to address the latter question first. The ABI stability decision in Prague is less of a decision. It was more of a discussion, and yeah, there was a poll, but the takeaway is we should still consider ABI breaks on a case-by-case basis, and and I think we will continue to do so. As for if it's an ABI break for strings and regex, yes, particularly for regex. We've had a couple of papers that have proposed ways of extending the current regex library, and from talking to implementers, there's just no way that they can do that without an ABI break. Even to just refreshing the like support for a newer ECMA regex, ECMA script regex standard in there. We can't do that without an ABI break. Even additions we can't do. So it's kind of a frozen in time design right now. For strings like the basic string, we certainly add new methods and such, or new free functions, and that's of course not a problem. But if we were to go back and try and legislate a certain encoding to be used by basic string, that's not something that we could do. Certainly not without an ABI break, and I'm sure not really at all for compatibility reasons.
Corentin?
So I want to advise to string specifically. It's better to see string as an intermediate sequence of bytes or code units, and it's really not designed to do text. So if you have ASCII, it happens to work, but it's better to use it. But when you use string, you're basically comparing bytes rather than text, and it's better to see it that way. We are certainly looking at adding a different type to handle text, where you can actually compare character by character and so forth.
And I guess I'll add in that, yeah, ABI for text things even comes up in stranger places. So we've had discussions about extended floating point types and how to format those. And at least with IO streams, formatting a 128-bit double runs into some ABI challenges, along with other challenges too. So yes, ABI and IO streams and regex, all very, very challenging. Okay, so this one, I'm not entirely sure if we're the best audience for this question, but we're going to ask it anyway.
You can try.
So what was the hardest decision due to the C++20 deadline? So I'm going to start with this and say why it's not entirely this group. So LEWG, so in the C++20 timeframe, forwarded lots and lots of papers to the specification group, LWG, and a lot of those papers didn't end up making it into the standard in time. So LWG had a lot of the last minute C++20 decisions in terms of what goes in and what doesn't. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't any, that there were still some decisions for LEWG to decide, okay, what should we even attempt to make in? So Billy, do you have any thoughts on this on the library evolution side of what were some of the difficult decisions to make?
The hardest decisions were probably what not to forward. We just talked about networking, and certainly there were plenty of people that would have loved to have seen networking in C++20. Beyond that, yeah, I probably agree with you that one of the reasons why we have lots of co-chairs now is because we're trying to address the problem of not being able to get as many papers through the process.
Any comments from Corentin on this?
Yes, basically same thing as Ben. We forwarded a lot of things that we really wanted to be in C++20, and they were dropped on the floor because they didn't have time in the boarding group. but this will probably be in 23, so they are like not lost completely. They will come back in force in the next revision, hopefully. One example of that I was really looking forward to and missed the train was the stack trace library, which was supposed to be in 20 and will be in 23, hopefully. We just finished the boarding on that last week.
Tom?
For me, maybe this is answering the question sort of backwards, but for me, the two hardest decisions were modules and coroutines, because we did not have library adoption in them in C++20. And that made it difficult to really evaluate whether the design is what we need and what we're going to want going forward, particularly with modules where we really don't have much for deployment experience to draw on, outside of a few kind of proprietary code bases. For coroutines, we did at least have very good reports from people using it that were able to provide their own library framework on top of it, and were very successful with that. So it'll be interesting to see what we do in the C++23 timeframe with those features in order to better enable library adoption of them.
And both of those things are in the plan. The paper is P0592. That's the plan for C++23 for getting standard library modules and coroutine library support. So those are the things that this group is working on, possibly to the exclusion of other things. So let's see. The next question. I like the proposed stood expected for certain use cases. What are the odds on it of it making it in? Billy, do you have thoughts on this?
So this came up in a table discussion earlier this week. We forward that for Library Fundamentals TS v3 to LWG, and right now the TSs are getting less attention at some level. Error handling expected is just one of the things that we've looked at. I know Bryce has some opinions on the technical specifications. You might want to ask this afternoon if you want a different answer. Right now, it's probably just going to go through the process, and the actual question was odds on it making it in. It's in the process. I guess that's the best I can say right now.
So let's see. I think I'm going to say that I think the odds of it making it into the international standard for C++23 are very low. I think the odds of it making it into the international standard at some point, most likely 26 or so, I'd say that's got about a 75% or so chance. The main thing that I think would make it not happen is if some other error handling mechanism comes along to where we decide we no longer want expected. But yes, the topic of error handling is very deep and contentious. So, okay, I didn't bug Corentin last time because there's a question in the queue just for you. Can you talk about the day the standard library died?
So that is in reference to a blog post I wrote about ABI after the Prague meeting. And to be clear, right, the standard library is not dead yet, but ABI puts a lot of constraint on what we can add to the standard library, on when we can change to the standard library. And that means that the standard library is leaving performance on the table for the sake of ABI, or is not fixing bugs for the sake of ABI. And the long-term effect of that is that the standard library is not competitive with other library. And there's an analogy that Titus Winter had at some point, which is then the standard library basically became like McDonald's, right? It's there, it's everywhere. You can use it. You know how it tastes, but it doesn't taste very good. And ABI, committing to ABI stability poses the risk of the standard library becoming a bit like that, something that is universally available, but it doesn't necessarily fit your need because it's not performance, it's not modern enough, it doesn't have enough feature because we shy away from adding feature because of ABI concern. So that's basically what that title was referring to.
So let's see. On Reddit a while back, I had a kind of counterpoint to a lot of the ABI discussions, and so I don't disagree with a lot of what Corentin just said. The constraint of ABI is real, and it makes for challenging decisions. And I think everyone in the committee understands that it makes things hard. So my opinion is the way that that things should go forward is that we should do more things along the lines of auto putter to unique putter, to where, yes, we make a new thing that looks almost exactly like the old thing, but it's just a little bit better. But right now, we don't necessarily have consensus for that, and it's a lot of work to go and say, well, making the first unordered map was expensive enough. Making a second unordered map, it's a lot of time to go through and respecify that stuff. I think that's the right way to do things, but it is a lot of work, and none of us have a full decision on the committee. It all has to get consensus, and someone would have to be the person to write the paper to make unordered map 2 to go through all of this. And we haven't had a whole lot of new containers make it all the way through the standard library, through the process. We have flat map and flat set, which are in the queue that will hit whatever standard that the specification group can get them into. But as far as like hashing, that's a lot more difficult because there's still active research going on there. And then there's things like regular expressions and IO streams and all of these other things that often, tie our hands with regards to ABI. And so it is tough. I think there's a way forward. It's not ideal, but yeah, you now heard a few different opinions on this. And if you ask a bunch of other committee members, they'll probably have other opinions on this too.
Yes, but there is a way forward, and it's not ideal, and that way forward is to taunt Corentin into writing a paper on it. I've had lots of success with that. So.
I want to address what Ben said in terms of having like another map 2. The issue with that, if you have another interface that takes another map and you have another map 2, then you need to convert your type, and that is very complicated. But I think there's like a glimmer of hope there, which is a concept, because instead of having concrete type in your interface, you can just have a concept-driven interface that are compatible with anything that looks like a map, and that solve a lot of issue in how we can have like new type to replace these old things that we would like to break.
Okay, so next up is I'm gonna start this with Billy, but I think people want to hear my opinion on this too. So I just wrote again, lightweight elementary data structures for an embedded project. What are the prospects for someday having embedded friendly alternatives to the STL? Go for it, Billy.
A paper would be the starting point. If it's something that's drastically different than what we have. Embedded's a pretty big term. At some level, where I work would be embedded, but we have an almost complete execution environment. So Ben, with his freestanding work and other things, is more towards the no operating system type of embedded. Yeah, it's something that obviously we have a lot of people that desire to be able to use, and I don't see us doing anything just because we have nothing else to do, because we certainly have plenty to do right now.
So yeah, the data structures are a difficult thing because of heap allocations and because of error handling. Because in an awful lot of embedded, I try to use the word microcontroller to scope it down more. So in like microcontroller use cases, you often don't have a heap, and exceptions normally are too expensive to use. So figuring out how to get the error handling on those containers is difficult. You could just say, okay, well, we'll terminate, but even that's not an awesome option. So the stuff that I've got in my freestanding paper so far just has array. There is a data structure queued up for library fundamentals. I think it's called like static vector or fixed capacity vector. I don't remember exactly which name was landed on. That has some potential, but that one also has error handling concerns that I'm not thrilled with. If you keep on pushing past your capacity, you just get undefined behavior right now. So I think that's one of the questions that we want to have answered for that container in the TS is that behavior acceptable or not? But there's the extra challenge to go with that is if we say, okay, undefined behavior there isn't acceptable, well, what error handling mechanisms do we have that would be acceptable? And we don't have great answers for that question either. So I think that someday we will have something. Right now, I am my hope for that is that Herb Sutter's static exceptions make it in, and that we'd be able to have, based off of what allocator you're using, a different error handling model for the container, so that you could say, okay, I'm using a static exceptions based allocator. Therefore, vector is using static exceptions instead of today's C++ exceptions. And then you could pass, an embedded friendly allocator to stood vector and use that. That's my hope, but there's no paper for that, and it has a whole bunch of dependencies on other moving parts. So the bad news there is it's probably going to be 29, 26 if we're really lucky to have a dynamic array type. Maybe someone could come along with an intrusive list or an intrusive map or something like that that would be embedded friendly. But I don't know of any work going on right now. So someone does have to write a paper.
Perhaps some of the work going on for const expert containers.
So yes, so const expert containers, that is something to where at least at compile time we could do something. And I do have plans there, but I need an implementation that has that ready so I can prototype it before I make a proposal to say all the const expert stuff is freestanding so long as it's done at compile time. I need some amount of implementation experience before I write that paper. Okay. Next question, and we've got a lot of people in here that were involved in the tooling group. So any chance of having a standard tool such as recent languages, or any chance for having a standard tool for fetching and working with external libraries? So colloquially, a package manager. Corentin, take a shot at this one.
Okay. I think there is some contradiction in the C++ community where we really like to be able to tweak our library with a lot of macro and have lots of different configuration. And we might be using different library on different operating system, or trying to use a standard library, and if not, fall back to something else. And we like to open other people's namespaces and so forth and so forth. And all of these freedom that we like to have, make it really difficult to actually have an ecosystem. And so I think we have to choose between, do we want that unlimited freedom of be able to do whatever we want, and the ability to actually be part of an ecosystem. These are a bit contradictory goals, in my opinion. So I think that's the fundamental reason why a tool is difficult to make for C++.
Hey. So let's see. I'll pitch in my commentary there. The C++ committee doesn't produce implementations. We don't produce tools. We produce standards. So in theory, we could standardize something that says this is how a package manager should work. But that doesn't mean that anyone's going to come and implement them. Typically, we kind of go the other way around, to where we have, or we would like to go the other way around and say, here's some existing practice. Let's make sure that multiple vendors can, participate in this thing. So to that end, I would say the best shot for there to be a standard ecosystem is to support the ones that we've already got. So figure out how to make the Linux package managers that you're dealing with better suit your needs. Figure out how to make VC package and Conan better suit your needs. And then if you can figure out how to get those to interoperate, then that's something that we can do more for standardizing. Now, this is something that it's a high cost to make all of this work well, but there's also a very high benefit. And a lot of the people in the C++ community really want there to be a package manager, but it's hard for like all the reasons that Corentin said, and then just the infrastructure costs and the network effects that go on. If a new package manager showed up tomorrow, then my employer probably wouldn't be able to use it for quite some time because we've got our own solution right now. And I suspect a lot of other companies are in that same situation. Tom?
Yeah, I would add to that. I don't think, I'm not particularly in favor of a single package manager. I'm getting out there. I think competition is good. And I think there is a lot of experimentation going on out there today, and we're getting some field experience there. I think if we were to standardize something right now, it likely would not be what we would end up wanting for the long term, and therefore doesn't really solve the problem. I'm mostly pretty happy with the way Linux systems are doing package management these days, and if we can stream more into that kind of environment, and likewise, VC package, a lot of what Ben just said, I think is the right way to go. There probably are some ways that we can encourage design of our libraries to make them more packageable, going along with things like Corentin said, avoiding macros or coming up with better ways to manage the configuration. But I know I don't have any specific ideas on what we might improve in that regard.
Okay, our next question is more about ABI, but this one's a bit more concrete. Was there any significant ABI breakage recently, which is not string or list? Any thoughts on this one? I can think of one that wasn't big, but some of the aligned alloc and malloc stuff. There've been some notes on some of the Visual Studio release notes saying that getting those to have the right properties would be an ABI break in some cases. Does anyone have any thoughts on other things that possibly broke ABI since 11?
There are pretty few, but I think people are using these to list ABI breaks that might not have been handled as well as it could have been at the time to make sure that no further ABI breaks are made. it serves as a bit of cautionary tale that maybe we shouldn't break ABI because, as you said, people are still dealing with good strings, so we got a bit scared by ABI break. So that's why ABI has mostly remained stable since then. But there have been a few, I think. Nothing major.
And yeah, I guess I'm thinking there are some technical ABI breaks that have happened that haven't been an ABI break in practice. So I think like a pushback on vector, or maybe it was in place back, it now returned a reference to the thing it emplaced. That's technically an ABI break, but implementations have ways of making that not actually be an ABI break in practice by keeping the old implementation around and hidden in interesting ways. So there's been little things, but I think since 11 there hasn't been anything big. We do keep it in mind though. So I mean, part of the discussions of standard library modules in the future is making sure that we can evolve the standard library modules without causing ABI problems.
I think one of the ABI breaks that did come in C++20 was for std file system and the U8 string member function, that it now returns a U8 string rather than a string. I think all of the library implementers were able to avoid an ABI break on that because they knew about it and such. So sounded like somebody's dog maybe saw. Yeah, sounds like somebody's dog maybe saw a Rust programmer go by.
Let's see. We've got a lighthearted one here. It's quite common to see members of the committee with a Hawaiian shirt. Corentin now, Herb on all of his talks. What's up with that?
I'll just say that I was going to use a Hawaiian shirt today, but chose the CppCon one instead. We get to go to Hawaii and sit in rooms and not see trees and surf and talk about C++ for a week. And for some reason, we all come back with T-shirts. And so that's probably where you're seeing it.
Maybe the new international symbol for C++ should be the pineapple.
And there is I think the tradition is falling off at this point, but there at least used to be the tradition of a ironic T-shirt Wednesday or Thursday or some day of the face-to-face meetings, to where people would often wear shirts from their competitors. So you would see one chip maker wearing a T-shirt of another chip maker, and one compiler person wearing a T-shirt of a different compiler person. Being careful not to name names here. Let's see. So, if the POSIX standard can specify the basic command line interface for compilers, why can't the committee? Anyone want to take a shot at this one?
Ben, you want to?
Sure, I can. So we could specify it if we want to. To some degree, we get to figure out the scope of our own efforts. We decide what's in scope or not. So it's largely a matter of having papers and having consensus. Now, there's still the challenge of, do we want to pick a winner? And we try not to do that, to say it's like, okay, all the GCC and Clang style options, we're going to go with those. And well, MSVC, you're just going to have to do what they did. We try not to pick winners like that. So that's going to be one of the challenges. Now, there has been a paper that's tried to kind of backdoor standardize some of these command line options before. Rene Rivera had a paper on having a function std compile, and it took a whole bunch of string literals for the command line options, and that was kind of a backdoor way. One of the ways you could see that is a backdoor way of standardizing the command line options, because presumably if std compile supported those things, then the command line would, and then that may make it easier to write more. it would make it easier to have a portable build and packaging system. I don't recall what happened with that paper. I know it hasn't gotten, if I don't know if it's still active or not. It hasn't gotten very far in the committee. So we could do something. So far, we haven't, and we've at least the committee so far has been pretty narrowly focused on the language in the library, if you call however many thousand pages of the standard narrow. So it would require a bit of a shift of the mentality of the committee to say, these are extra things that we're willing to standardize.
Yes, and I don't think C++ actually require a compiler. There is a project from CERN, which is Cling, which is interpreted C++, and then compiler flag don't mean the same thing, right? And you also have like the issue of what the semantic of the flag mean, because implementation have a lot of difference. And so what is a debug flag for MSVC or optimization level might be completely different from MSVC and LLVM because they don't have the same infrastructure, architecture, and so forth. So it's really hard to find semantic. And I don't think it's really useful because having different compiler flags is not what makes build system difficult, I think.
Yeah, so one place where this, I think, becomes very relevant in the near future, and it's not quite command line per se, but in the for modules. One of the things we've talked about in SG15 is the idea of having a module manifest that goes with the module artifact files, or BMI or CMI, whatever, however you've heard it described. That would have the meta information about how the module is generated. Since the module artifacts themselves are not portable in any way, not even between necessarily versions of the same compiler, the idea behind a manifest is that it has all the information needed to reproduce that module using whatever compiler and such you might be using. So having some standardized ability to state requirements for recompilation, we do actually have a reasonably strong use case for these days. Whether that feeds back into an actual command line interface is perhaps a little different, but maybe there will be some movement along these lines in the not too distant future.
And I've once again fallen into the trap of when thinking about tooling, only thinking about build stuff. And then almost all the time when I fall into that trap, there's Tom there. It's like, oh yeah, static analyzer. It's like, dang it, I was going to remember this time. Okay, more ABI questions. Should someone create a new STL implementation that has no or practically no ABI stability? Go for it, Corentin.
Yeah, so a few weeks ago, I was playing with the STD C++ tuple implementation. And that has existed since C++ 11. And just by using C++ 20, I was able to remove 2/3 of the code, basically, just because C++ has become a much more expressive language. So there might be like some value in like trying to make another standard library from scratch, but in the other hand, it's so much work for so many people that it's discutable whether there would be value in that. And I think at some point in history, libc++ didn't commit to ABI, and after a while, they started to say, okay, we care about ABI because our user cares. So it's not a given that starting a new C++ implementation will free you from ABI. And because we already have 3 implementations as the standard care about or more, even if your own implementation doesn't care about ABI, you are still constrained by what the committee is willing to do. So there are change of interface that will never happen regardless.
So yeah, in the blog-ish post that I made a while back, that was one thing that I've omitted to some degree, is that ABI, so there's a lot of things that ABI keeps, that implementers could do if they didn't care about ABI, there's a lot of things that even the standard still wouldn't do, even if we didn't care about ABI, because it changes the semantics of code. It would be an interface break as well as an ABI. But there are still some things like that like strict additions from ECMAScript to regex that maybe we could do if ABI weren't a concern. So yes, the standard is still kind of restricted by whatever the lowest common denominator. But to the question itself, should someone create a new STL implementation that has no or practically no ABI stability? To some degree, at least libc++ has an ABI experimental flag to where you can use the latest, greatest ABI that doesn't care about compatibility at all. And there are several ABI breaks queued up in that branch. GCC has an ABI unstable branch that almost no one tests or uses, at least as of like 6 months or so ago. And MSVC, their implementation has, right now it's still in old TFS repo somewhere, allegedly, of their ABI breaking implementation that they've said that they want to, update it and get it published, and I believe at some point they will. But for each of those, you could take those, build them, and use them yourself. And sure, it's ABI breaking. You can do that. And at least libc++ is pretty easy to build. It's not it's not months of effort or even weeks of effort to figure out how to get that to build with the ABI and stable flag. So to some degree, it's there. It's not going to make it the committee's job any easier, but it could get you a little bit more efficient or better in some ways implementation than if you use the ABI stable version.
And of course, there are easy ways that you can avoid all ABI problems, and that's if you write your code so that it is only evaluated at compile time. There are some minor limitations with that approach, but
is this the point where I suggest people use stood embed on dev/eth0 so they can get compile time Ethernet networking? Let's see. Looking down for the next question. Okay. Let me get this one because we may have time for this one and maybe one more. So what's the path forward for stability versus progress? If something goes in the standard library that gets outdated, what should we do? Billy, this time I'm going to pick on you.
So there's been lots of discussions lately about our Annex D where we've deprecated things and StirStream being a poster child of something that's gone deprecated, but we've never removed. Having written one of the papers on removal of auto pointer, I think we should embrace that sometimes we make mistakes and that things will disappear at some particular language level. And we really shouldn't be afraid that something like auto pointer does disappear. I know there are code bases that have used it, but something goes in standard, it gets outdated, which we do. Yeah, so I don't think it's a bad thing that something leaves the standard. As far as outdated, if it's outdated but not really broken, there's people that say maybe we should get rid of bind because we have lambdas, but maybe not. I would say for something to be removed from the library, it really has to have a better replacement and a consensus that it's something that we really shouldn't be using anymore.
I think Ben answered this question very well earlier about how we provide something new. As much as we can provide resources for migrating to it. If we look at other interface ecosystems, if you look at the Win32 API, right, that's how they've managed things. You've seen function ex, function ex, function ex2. The naming gets ugly, but that does preserve both the path forward and stability. And that's probably about the best that we can do.
So I do think there is room for the committee to improve here in that there are some places where in particular, where we use virtual functions or some other kind of dynamic dispatch. So std function has some dynamic dispatch. And those virtual functions and dynamic dispatch are much harder to evolve than classes without it. I think we could do a better job in the future of whenever we see something that's got this dynamic dispatch cooked in, that we make sure to put some kind of versioning on it so that we can evolve it in the future. We haven't had a great track record with that in the past. I think I heard Titus say at one point that, okay, we got some of the polymorphic memory resource stuff in C++ 17, and within a few meetings after that was done, someone wanted to add another virtual function to it to break ABI. So we didn't even get a full release use out of it. And if you've already got virtual functions there, it's not free to add versioning, but it's extremely cheap compared to a container class. So that's one of those places where we'd have to decide where our trade-offs are, whether we want to be able to evolve it or whether we want to get the optimal version of what we have in front of us right this very moment. So I think there's room for improvement, but yeah, that's where we are. Commentary, Corentin?
Yes, I think there are very good arguments in both sides of this discussion. I think it's a discussion we had for a few years. I expect we will still have the same discussion in a few years, and it's really hard to resolve, and I'm not sure that we will. So there might always be this tension between stability and progress going forward.
Okay, so I think I will throw up one last question, not a question here, to close things off. So I haven't been saying who's been asking these questions so far, but this one I will, because this one is Hana is saying, "You're all heroes for us, do you know?" And if you think so, fine. But I mean, you're also on the Hana is also on the committee as well, and it's impressed a lot of us with the compile time skills. And I guess I'll say my one brief story that I think I met her in Kona, the last Kona that we had, and she pitched some of her compile time run CTRE stuff. And then at after hours, she was seeing, oh, can we do some of this compile time evaluation stuff for the format library, which hadn't hit the library, which hadn't been standardized yet? And it's like, yeah, I got this working, after the meeting, and just getting it all, evaluated and checked at compile time. And I always thought that was amazing. So it's, the shout out for other people of the committee. It's a volunteer organization. We do what we can, but it requires other people to help. So,
I remember that day in Kona too. I was really impressed. I've been managing the mailing list discussion these past few months, and that is a amount of work. And it gave me a lot of respect for people that actually doing sharing. Bryce, Tom, and Billy there. It's a lot of work. So I think these people are the real hero. And Anna is sharing the reflections to the group, which is really impressive.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I'll give one other shout out for people in the committee that, are very, that really help things going on. So yes, you see a lot of work from the paper authors, but then there are some people that don't necessarily write as many papers, but actually go through and do the in-depth review, provide really good feedback on those papers. And one person in particular on the library front that, I guess I should say two. So one that I see on the mailing list very active is Tomasz Kaczynski, I think is the last name. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing Kaminsky. He almost always has in-depth feedback. He will go and read through and have excellent feedback on papers. And then one person that's helped me a lot with my work recently has been Walter Brown in reviewing and getting the wording and specifications solidified so that it can move forward to the specification groups and fix my terrible grammar in some cases.
And not just
So,
that,
yes.
I see Walter is sort of our moral compass,
Yes.
keeping us, pointed in the right direction, making sure we're thinking of the, the bigger picture, and yeah.
So I think we're out of time. Any closing comments, Billy, Corentin?
I just say that I hope everyone's enjoying the conference, and you've got another 2 days of plenary talks and chances to sit around tables and talk to people and take advantage of it.
And likewise, I would say, if you want to get more involved, there are ways to get more involved. SG16 is an open study group. If you just Google or search for WG21 SG16, you will find our page, and that's got links to our open mailing list and our telecon schedules and Slack and everything else. So you can jump right in and offer your thoughts.
Yeah. You can always take whatever paper off of the mailing and email the author with your commentary and feedback, and they will generally appreciate it if it's well thought out.
Yes, that is very useful. Yeah.
Okay, I think we are out of time. So thank everyone for coming and providing your questions. There's another one of these with a different panel later on today. So thanks.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.